we are here to do the last reading wrap up for 2023, even though we are now in 2024. We are here to wrap up my December reading, and I'm always on the bubble if I should do these or not, because it kind of feels like old news, and I'm like trying to get to all my like, here's what I'm gonna do in 2024. We're kind of in that like liminal space of between, and this year though I was like, oh, I'm definitely doing this because December was such a good reading month. It was so wonderful to be reading things that I was enjoying. I definitely had a couple of things that I did not enjoy, but like you'll see, the stats are high because overall I was just reading good books that I was enjoying. We'll talk about the stats and then we'll talk about my superlatives and my challenges and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I read 27 books in December, 21 of which I owned, 7 of which I did not, for a total of 8,631 pages and an average book length of 320 pages. Paid $5.63 on average for these books, and I paid for 37% of them. Genre-wise, I still had a lot of mystery because I was coming out of my Goodreads Choice Award epic project, which you will see reflected in some of these books. So I definitely had a lot of mystery still, so that was my highest, but I finally got back into reading some fantasy and some other, you know, mixing genres up a little bit more this month, so that felt good to get back to normal a little bit there. In terms of projects, so definitely the biggest one was Goodreads Choice Awards. I was still reading for that. I also had a good number of buddy reads and kind of like challenges I was wrapping up for the year / starting like in the middle of, so I can't talk to you but guys really about some of that stuff, but I definitely read a lot for challenges purely just because of that Goodreads video. But I also actually read 5 advanced reader copies that I want to talk to you guys about because I always do that. So one was, let's start with the romances and then we'll do a fantasy and a mystery one. So romance wise, I read Raiders of the Lost Heart by Joe Seguera, and this was a fun one and had a lot of promise, even if I think some of the execution wasn't quite where I was hoping it might be. So this is, I believe, a debut. If not, I don't think the author has written much besides this, but it is pitched as sort of like Indiana Jones and Laura Croft are rival archaeologists going on a dig and they fall in love. And that is kind of what, I mean, I think that that's a fair pitch. That is basically what's happening, except I think that that implies a lot more action than we end up getting in this book. So we definitely, that is the correct setup. They are enemies, like they're rivals, they're academic rivals, but the woman is a expert in the area that the dude is leading. They're not making a ton of progress, so he like kind of begrudgingly calls her in, and they're looking for this artifact from this ancient indigenous hero in Mexico, and there's also other things afoot. Things progress from there. I think that it is pretty fun. I think I gave this 3.5 stars. Yeah. I gave this 3.5 stars because I had fun with this and I liked a lot of the ideas in it, but there are 2 things. One, like I said, I wish that there was more action because it kind of pitches itself as being action oriented and I would have loved more hijinks between them. And 2, it does kind of like suggest a lot of questions about, you know, she believes herself to be a descendant of this person, so she does have, you know, some like cultural familial ties to the region, so that's, I think, an interesting thing to layer in. He is white. They are also doing this dig where they're going to be taking things back to a museum. Like, I just think that there's a lot of questions that in 2023, when I read this, it suggests. And I think that they're kind of raised and kind of addressed, but not fully. But I don't know. I just think there was sort of like a lot of subtext that was not explored that was introduced. So I think either it needed to be more explored or it needed to just like not exist. So anyway, I think that this, especially for a debut though, was pretty solid, and I would love more action romance. So for that reason, would recommend and like give me more. I love more action-y romance. Always Only You by Chloe Lisa E. This one has been on my TBR for a long time because it started off as self-pub and then eventually it got picked up by Berkeley, I believe, for like traditional publishing. This took me a while to get into, but once I did, I was hooked. It's got a specific voice to it. So it's friends to lovers story. The dude is on a hockey team, so I guess it is technically a hockey romance, so that's not really, it doesn't necessarily read like that fully. I don't know. Part of what I loved about this was I did eventually get into the voice of it. And also there's so much disability rep in this, and especially like the autoimmune disease piece of it. I was like, yes, let's do this. But there's like a ton of just like very casual diversity of body, like ableness, like just different people kind of like across the board, both physically and like neurodivergence, like rep for that. I don't know. I just thought that this was really, appreciated how much of that there was. And I can at least speak for the autoimmune piece. I felt like that was handled well. So yeah, it's a friends to lovers story. It does have a very specific voice. You can kind of tell it comes from that indie publishing world, like the KU writing style, but I like that writing style. And once I got into it, I actually quite like this. So I would definitely read more from this author if there's a plot that intrigues me or like a trope set that I like. Not all of her trope sets seem to be for me, but this one definitely worked with the friends to lovers and the fact that we find out he's a virgin. I love a virgin hero because it introduces, like, it just tends to, it speaks to overall a less toxically masculine vibe in the hero. So that tends to work pretty well for me. Then Bride by Ali Hazelwood. Okay, this one's an interesting one. So Ali Hazelwood was born to write paranormal romance. If you've read her stuff, it has such that fan fiction-y vibe that I love, I'm obsessed with, I'm into it. Not for everyone though. But it is very well suited. As soon as I saw she was writing a paranormal romance, I was like, yes, Ali, this makes so much sense for you. I support this direction. And it does, her voice works very well in this kind of book. It is a paranormal where the heroine is a vampire. She's like a vampire princess. I don't know. Her dad and brother are like the head of the vampire council or whatever. There's sort of like, kind of like almost sort of like a collateral or like a hostage negotiation kind of situation between them and the werewolves, and their alpha is going to marry her. But it's like, is it a real marriage? Because, you know, it's politicking. So this is like definitive enemies to lovers, okay? So if you love that, this is what this is. It was a higher angst paranormal than I guess I had envisioned her writing. It's not like, how to say, it's just, it wasn't I was expecting it to be like easy breezy rom-com version of a paranormal romance, and I would not say that's what this is. Which is not my personal favorite type of paranormal romance. I tend to enjoy the camp a little bit more, but her voice is so intrinsically campy that it gave me enough of that I could get through it. Or like, I say get through it. I ate this up with a spoon. I enjoyed this, but it just wasn't completely for me. And then I also think you can definitely tell this is her first time writing in this subgenre. There's a lot of sort of info dumpy world building stuff at the beginning. But once we kind of got into the groove of it, I was very into it. And by the end, so this does have an HEA for this one, but it clearly is setting up a series because in the epilogue, it's clear that there is going to be another couple. So yeah, like she has a friend that's gone missing and she needs the wares to help her. Like there's a lot of external plot stuff happening, and I enjoyed this one. I think that these will get better now that the world is kind of established and she's had a go round in it. So I would give this like a B+. I gave it a 3.5 star. But if you like that trope set better, you might like it better than I did. But if you don't like Ali Hazelwood's writing, don't read this book. Like, you know, if you've read Ali Hazelwood book already and you know you don't like her writing, don't read this book. It's not for you. And if you need like really good, solid world building, don't read this book either. So I think if you're into her voice and willing to roll with some of the like trying a new genre bits, I think this could be for you. And then one that is not fully a romance, but on the cusp of romantic suspense, but I think of these as mystery, Random in Death. It is the next in-depth book that is coming out from J.D. Robb. This is book, I think, 58. I might be wrong there. And it's called Random in Death because it is somebody is preying on these people kind of like randomly. Or though we learn as time goes on, like sort of why they're the ones kind of in the crosshairs. But anyway, so it's a series serial killer kind of story, and it is definitely a true blue police procedural. If you are a reader of the series, we do have some good character moments, particularly with Nadine and Jake, because Jake is on, like, the first thing that happens, this is like literally page 1, the first murder happens at a concert, one of his concerts. So if you're a long time lover of the series, we get some good moments with them. But I would say this is one, if you wanted to just get a flavor, there's not a ton of backstory stuff happening. So if you just want to get a flavor of what the police procedural elements of In Death are like, I think this is one you could give a try. Is it my favorite in the series? No, but I think it's a really good version of what the series does. It is a police procedural. It has those futuristic elements. It has the Eve and Rourke relationship. Like, solid, 4 stars. It gave me what I wanted. Entertainment, that kind of police procedural. It did very well. And yeah, it was good. So 4 stars. I should mention, I believe that is my last St. Martin's Press arc that I already had. And I am not participating in the full review hiatus for St. Martin's Press for, like, basically I want to follow the BDS guidelines. But I don't appreciate the things that I've heard about their policies regarding how they give out arcs. So until we hear from them, like, what they're going to do to make sure that there are not discriminatory issues in terms of how they're giving out arcs, I will not be accepting anymore. So anyway, that was my last one, so I thought I would mention that. And then, yeah, my last one was, oh gosh, am I gonna get this title right? I get this title wrong every time. Mislaid Parts in Half-Known Places. In Places Half-Known. Shauna McGuire's titles are always so word salad in my head. Okay, so part the first. This is a real follow-up, as in, like, this feels like part 2 to the book that came out last year, which was, oh god, I can't remember, Ansie's book, the one with the portals, Antoinette, her book. This is really like the conclusion to her story in a lot of ways, but we have a lot of the kids that we know from the home participating. Like, okay, so anyway, let me back up and give you the plot synopsis. I just want to mention, you definitely need to have read last year's book before you read this year's book. Okay, so this is a continuation from that. Ansie is back, she's at the home, and she basically, like, has an affinity for doors. Like, doors come to her. So there are other kids at the home who want to go back they want to go back to their portal world, so they're trying to, like, use her to get their door back. She's trying to not make that happen, and her and Cade and Cora and the whole gang end up going through the door and, like, having an adventure. Okay, so that I enjoyed the character parts of it. Plot-wise, I felt like this one was a little bit of a mess. This is probably my least favorite in the series, except for the third book, which was that, what is it, the Half Sky, the one with the blue and pink on the cover. And I think for very similar reasons. Both of them have a lot of what's-her-face. The girl who, I don't want to spoil things, but it has one of the characters, I'm being so unhelpful in this review, one of the characters who has gone to one of the nonsense lands, and she was, like, a big part of the first book, and then she's definitely a really big part of the third book. That's kind of like her book. She's not my favorite character. This mode of sort of, like, adventuring as a group through the doors is something that both of those books share. That's the book that this most reminds me of. I really should just look up what the F this book is called, just because I'm being so frickin' vague that I feel like I'm not making any sense. But anyway, so they're very similar books, and it was good. I don't think I've ever had a bad time in a Wayward Children book from Shauna McGuire. Like, the whole series, I think if you like it, is pretty consistent, but I do think that this is, like, one of the lesser books in the series, because I just felt like the plot was, like, not beneath the sugar sky. Thank you. Okay. Whew, that was gonna drive me crazy. So this year's book, which is Mislaid Parts and Half-Known Places, very similar to Beneath the Sugar Sky in its tone and in its spotlighting of Rennie. Okay, so there we go. Now I at least feel like I can say that I gave you the information I was trying to give you. It's not bad. Bottom line, TLDR, not bad. Plot is a little bit of a miss. And for the fact that there's a dinosaur on the cover, there are not nearly enough dinosaurs in this book, and that's all I'll say. Moving swiftly onwards, because I feel like that was a little bit of a mess. Hopefully editing Mara fixed that a little bit. Okay, moving into superlatives. So I had 4 I think I wanted to talk about. Yes. We'll start with the one I just wanted to shout out. So it came from the closet, Queer Reflections on Horror, which is edited by Joe Belize. If you, like me, have watched lots of surrounding videos, the Plagiarism and YouTube video from H-Bomber Guy, and it made you think like, God, I wish that there were better people out there representing like queer analysis of media. That's what inspired me to pick this up. I saw this at my local bookstore and I'd heard a few people talking about it, but I was like, oh yes, I am definitely in the mood to read some actual legitimate original work thinking about media from a queer POV. So I just wanted to put this on your radar. This is, the superlative is, if you needed an antidote to plagiarism in YouTube by H-Bomber Guy, this is it. He also links a ton of other video essayists, but if you want a book version, I wanted to put this up for your consideration. And my MVP is the last one, which is Notes on Sleepaway Camp by Veet Din. This is if you have watched Sleepaway Camp, you must watch it first. And then also if you appreciate his ode to Susan Sontag in its form. So anyway, that very specific award, but a necessary one. Then this superlative is maybe I waited too long and my expectations were just too high. And that is Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I also think, I read Six of Crows a couple of years ago, and there's a reason why I hadn't been rushing to pick this up. And that was because I thought it was fine. I thought it was good. I think I gave it 3.5 too. I gave both of these 3.5 stars, like a B+. It was good. I definitely now can say, I agree with the people who say you should read the Grishaverse books first. There are some people who say you don't need to read them. There's other people who say you do. I think for you to be fully invested in this, you probably need to read the Grishaverse books, because I just wasn't invested in this in a way that a lot of people were. I also just think there's been so much hype around this duology in particular that these books are just like the creme de la creme of YA fantasy in the 2000s. That these are some kind of modern classics of that subgenre. I get it, but I think for me, what I like about YA fantasy is when they read like teens. And this just reads to me like adults. Like they all act like adults. So I think some of what I like in YA fantasy is just not what this is doing. I didn't have a pre-existing investment in the world. So I just think that this just ended up being a little bit disappointing to me, because I think I just let so much time pass for the hype. I think it might not just be what I want. I don't know. These are so hyped. People love these so much. And I didn't hate them. I mean, I gave them both 3.5. To me, that's a B+. They're fine. They're good. But I just don't quite get it. It's just not, it didn't end up being for me. And I wonder if I just, like I said, the superlative I gave this was expectations set too high from the hype. I picked this up, I think a year after it came out. I got this copy from Book Outlet, which is the first edition, it turns out, which is kind of fun. And it's got the pretty red pages. It's also fun. But yeah, so this came out in 2016. I think I picked this up from Book Outlet in 2017 or 18. So this has been on my TBR for a while, and I think I just let it age too much, and I let too much hype build up by the time I got to it. So all that to say, as somebody, if you like me have never embarked on this duology, I would submit 2 things for your consideration. 1, you probably need to try to read the Grishaverse original Shadow and Bone series first to get invested in the world. And 2, make sure you know if you're okay with your YA protagonists reading like they're adults, because in my opinion, they definitely do. And then we get to the first of my 4.5s. Oh, I just realized in my stats I didn't tell you guys. So I read 3 4.5 star books this month and 2 5 stars. That's so good. That's so exciting. So my average rating was, I think, 3.65, something like that. Ah, such a thrill. Okay, so I'm going to talk about all of those because I have to, obviously. So 2 of them, though, I'm going to put in the superlative category rather than the most recommend and most favorite. I'm so surprised that this exists in a traditional rom-com publisher's catalog. I'm going to give to The Fake Mate by Lana Ferguson. So I was at the bookstore. It's actually when I picked up, it came from the closet as well. And I saw this on the table and I was like, oh, The Fake Mate. Is this a paranormal rom-com? rom-com? And I looked at the back and yes, indeed. Okay, so like this is a fake dating scenario, but like a fake mate. So in this version of the world, they're like alpha shifters are known to be super violent and like territorial and difficult to work with. So there's this dude at this hospital. He's like their head cardiology guy, and he is a shifter, but he is also an alpha, but he's never told anybody that because of fantasy racism. Like basically he'll be treated differently. She is also a doctor. She's like in the ER, and she's also a shifter, and she's sick of people trying to set her up. So she just lies and tells her grandma that she's dating this guy. She goes and says like, hey, can we just take a picture together for me to send to my grandma? I'll tell her we broke up in a couple months. And he's like, actually, somebody just outed me as an alpha and I need a fake mate. Would you help a fellow shifter out to fight this scenario? And she's like, okay, whatever, fine. And so they start fake dating and they're gonna fall in love. Okay, but this, so I love that. All of just that, even if they were not paranormal, that would be for me. This though, she is an Omega. So guys, we have like a very vanilla hetero version of Omegaverse in a mainstream rom-com. So this is now, which could not be more for me. Like intersection of those two niche interests equals me. So here for it. Also between this and Bride, I read 2 different books with nodding this month that come from mainstream publishing. I just don't feel like I've seen a lot of that in recent years, but okay, anyway. So if you are somebody who's always wondered what the Omega fanfiction verse is like, you're usually kind of like rom-com, kind of girly, anal is like about as crazy as it gets in your sex scenes. This is what I'd recommend if you're interested, but like not wanting to be too shocked. Like too much. This is sort of like baby's first, no, not baby, grown adults first Omegaverse. And I loved it. I was like, oh my gosh, these are 2 totally different vibes that I'm loving the way they come together. So 4.5 stars. This was so for me. And I just thought it was super cute. And I liked that he is kind of a grump, but the reason is because he's just used to like not being able to interact with anyone because he doesn't want anyone to know he's an alpha. I felt like that was a very plausible reason for him to like be the way he was. I also like that they both eventually realized like, oh, you could have just sued the hospital for discrimination. Like, why didn't we just do that? That I thought was funny. Anyway, so surprised this exists, and it was for me. Not for everyone, but it was definitely for me. And then before we get to most and least recommended, balm for my weary soul is what I'm gonna say this one. The Chalice of the Gods, Percy Jackson. This is a 4.5 star. This is one of my favorites in the series. This is solving all the issues that I had with Heroes of Olympus, which is that there's way too many points of view and too many characters, and like gets back to what I like, which is Percy. He is our central point of view, and it's short. It cuts out, I think, some of the critiques I sometimes have of the Percy Jackson books, which is that they get a little long, which honestly is fine, especially like for the intended audience who are learning to read. Like, I love that there's a lot of that for them. But as a book, I would say that it ends up being very side questy, especially in the original series. So this is like giving me what I loved in the original series, but less and more focused of a quest. And there's, I assume going to be 3 of these, which I love. And this is Percy almost like getting ready to go to college. And so he has to go on these quests to get his recommendation letters from the gods to go to New Rome University with Annabeth. And I just love the perspective of this in terms of him seeing his mom in a new light, seeing his history of what he's been through in a new light as he's getting ready to age out of the demographic where in this world demigods are most vulnerable. Basically, like once they become adults, they mostly get left alone. So like he and Annabeth are about to hit that threshold, and like they both are very openly like, hey, we want to go to university and probably get married someday. Like they're kind of about to be in that next phase of life, and it just has a real poignancy. And there is a scene towards the end of this that made me weep. It was so good. And it's what I want from Percy Jackson. So I haven't heard a lot of people talking about the new one, honestly. Maybe I just haven't seen it, but it's totally worth picking up if you are a lover of this series. And I just thought it was beautiful and poignant, and I was here for it. Let's get to most recommend and least recommend. Least recommend I can't tell you much about because it's going to be in a thing. So I'll just tell you that The Center by Aisha Manazar Siddiqui, this is the one I would least recommend, and you will see a video talking about that more. We'll just leave that there. Most recommend, I would say, kind of following on from what we talked about last month, I would have to say The 100 Years War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi. This is a really good history of the last 100 years in Palestine, and I particularly want to recommend Sim Kearns's summary. They did a great series on TikTok summarizing each of the major chapters and kind of the big takeaways. I found that to be a really helpful way to sort of like synthesize the book experience as a whole at the end of it. So I'll link that below. I would highly recommend that if you are reading this, or even if you're not going to read it and you just want kind of like a summary. I think it's a very engaging one, and they did a great job putting that together. So I have to say that's the most recommended, along with our first 5-star, which is The Mysterious Case of the Alberton Angels by Janice Hallett. You guys, I knew eventually Janice Hallett was gonna be that girl. She was gonna write that book that I was like, yes, this is for me. I love this, and this is that book. I need you, US mystery, he, she's, and theys, to get out there. Request this from the library when it comes out in January. It's coming out this month in the US. It's been out for a year in the UK. Request it from the library. Get it from your bookstore. Whatever you gotta do to let publishing know that this is what we want. We want you to give us actual mysteries, and we want you to give them a big push, and we want them to be a big bestseller. This is so good. It's multimedia, which I love. I know that's not for everybody, but I love that. And it is just like a good old-fashioned mystery. I mean, not old-fashioned because it's true crime, and it's a reporter doing an investigation on a cult murder. So that doesn't feel very, I'm not talking like golden age of detective fiction. I just mean in the sense of like, she is trying to figure out what actually happened. And that is what the energy of the book is. There's definitely reveals. There's, you know, things that we learn along the way, but there's not twists in terms of like the dun dun dun, you never saw that coming kind of like domestic suspense thriller thing. Like, that's not the vibe. The vibe is more, you're learning more and more about the case. You're having theories about what's going on. You're having certain theories disproved. You're having other ones confirmed. Like, that's the vibe. And so even if you don't end up liking this, this is the kind of book that my fellow mystery lovers, I want us to support. Like this one, that one, the new Benjamin Stevenson one, like, let's show them that we like mystery. This is a mystery. And I loved it. It was so fun. 5 stars. One of my all-time favorite books, one of my all-time favorite mysteries. I knew she was gonna do it. I knew eventually Janice Hallett was gonna just give me exactly what I wanted. I could tell as soon as I read the appeal. Like, this one is good, but not quite it. The Twyford Code, I think, is hard for non-UK readers because it relies so heavily on accent understanding in written form, but it was still good. The Christmas appeal was good. Like, she's been consistently like giving me hints that she's gonna give me exactly what I want at some point, and this is it. And I love it. And there's a new one coming out in the UK sometime later this year that I will be pre-ordering and reading immediately, because she is now, I think, pretty close to an auto-buy, because this was fantastic. I even tell you the summary. It's a cult. So this woman gets asked by a publisher to participate in a series of true crime books that they're putting out. She is supposed to be investigating the Alberton Angels case, which is like a cult mass suicide case from about 20 years prior, and finding out what actually really happened and what happened. There's a baby there who survived. Like, what happened to that baby? What happened to the couple people who survived? Like, what was the real story? And that's what we're following her while she's trying to investigate and figure out. And it's just great. And then most favorite, least favorite. I think I'm gonna not get into this too much, because if you watch my Goodreads Choice Awards mystery nominee video, you will have heard me talk about these already. But my least favorite was Laretha Ann White's The Maid's Diary. Not my least favorite of that overall project, but for December, that was my least favorite one. Honestly, because I only had 2 stars out of all 27 books I read. So just kind of by default, this is probably my least favorite. It's a domestic suspense. I didn't think it did anything that interesting or unique. The writing was nice, but I did find the handling of the backstory / reveal of some elements to be distasteful and fear-mongering in a way that I found annoying. So for that reason, I gave it 2 stars. And then my favorite, which was also what I said my favorite of 2023, was The Last Devil to Die by Richard Osman. You've heard me gushing about this for like a month now, so what can I tell you? You need to get out there, read The Thursday Murder Club. People have been asking me, can you read this by itself? I don't think it'll really have the impact if you do that. I think if you want to, it's 4 books. I think you could get away with skipping the first one if you really wanted to and start with The Man Who Died Twice, just the second book. But I think you've at least got to read that and really probably also The Bullet That Missed, or you should read The Last Devil to Die. If you really, really wanted to, I guess you could skip The Bullet That Missed, but I wouldn't, why deny yourself the pleasure of this series? So this is fantastic. Favorite book of 2023 and favorite book of December reading. So there we go. Like I said, December was just great energy, a great way to end the year, and hopefully I'm bringing that energy into 2024. Let's hope and manifest that that is what my reading has in store for me in the year to come. So that's it for December 2023 reading. That's it for wrap-ups, except I'm going to do my stats and superlatives video for 2023 as a whole. So look for that. That's coming. Yeah, and then we're going to transition into doing some getting ready for 2024 stuff. So with that being said, let me know what you thought about any of the books I talked about. Let me know if you had any big hits or misses in kind of the last little bit in 2023. I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday season if you celebrate, and at least had a great new year. Happy New Year. Yeah, got a lot of good stuff coming, so stay tuned. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that that will do it. I hope you're having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!